Louis C.K. continues to make headlines just for existing at this point. The comedian who admitted to sexual misconduct last year for masturbating in front of some women who didn't like it that much, it turns out, returned to stand up a while ago with documented performances at assorted clubs, which drew their own sets of outrage because how dare he ever work again after what he got permission to do. He got permission. You can be like, well, they didn't really mean it, but that does not change the words that came out of their mouths as far as he's concerned due to his lack of telepathy-related abilities. Doesn't mean it was right, but it's also not that wrong. But so he returned to stand-up, and after the hubbub relating to that subsided, I thought we were pretty much done with the posturing pearl-clutching from then on, at least unless he ended up doing something else that was actually reprehensible. But according to some people, he did, because a video started to circulate of Louis C.K., Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, and Ricky Gervais having an on-camera discussion about comedy in which Louis says the N-word repeatedly. That video is 7 years old. It was released on YouTube 7 years ago after premiering on HBO. It's called Talking Funny. It's an hour-long discussion. It's still on YouTube if you want to find it, but a 2-minute portion of this clip started circulating again because now that Louis C.K. is a bad guy in the eyes of the woke police, everything they didn't give a shit about before is now fair game for hindsight backlash. Like, remember in 2011 when we all loved Louis C.K.? Well, now that he masturbated in front of some women, I think he was never funny for the last 23 years. I don't understand how people can just 180 the past like that. His personal life and professional body of work are not related insofar as whether his jokes are funny or not. If you watch the clip, it's a pretty frank, inoffensive discussion of the N-word. The only person who is called it is Louis C.K. himself, and Chris Rock is who calls him it. Then they talk about who says it. Seinfeld says he's never said it, that he hasn't found the humor in it and he's not looking, but that Louis C.K. and Chris Rock apparently have found it. And that's undeniable, because they both have used it in comedy specials, and they've both received uproarious laughter in response to how they used it. Use is the right word, by the way. You can say the N-word, but if you want to accomplish anything with it comedically, you have to use it. Some people can't emotionally detach themselves from the connotations of the word, but I'd argue those connotations depend on the context. We're not pre-civil rights era anymore. The N-word still exists as a tool of oppression in a very, very small capacity among actual races, but for the most part, you're just gonna hear it in a rap song or as part of a joke. Louis C.K. isn't trying to re-enslave you, and you know that. This is my 4th episode on him, so I'm clearly impassioned about the subject, not him personally, but what his situation represents. If Kevin Hart or Seinfeld or anybody had his same career trajectory and were in his same position and had done those same things, my script would be identical. When the biggest name in comedy becomes disgraced and then encounters resistance as he attempts to make a comeback, that's a story any comedy fan should follow religiously. The resistance is small, by the way. It can seem large on the internet because all your favorite part-time woke comedians have crawled out of their holes at the expectation of their fans to provide a short, flaccid moral condemnation that makes them look like they're on the right side of history before they go back to not giving a shit, but it's small. Blue check marks on Twitter are a lengthy decimal point of the population. They represent nothing and no one. But that's not even the end of the controversy, because Louis C.K. also made headlines a few days after that by somebody leaking audio of a set he did at a club where he made jokes about pronouns and school shooting survivors. This crossed an inevitable line, because again, Louis C.K. is a bad guy now, so the same level of things he's been joking about for 3 decades are now unacceptable because we no longer consider him an ally of social justice. This was leaked audio of a work-in-progress bit, a taboo for any other comedian to be judged on, but because it's Louis C.K., the comedians all jumped at the chance to further condemn the man they hate so much, throwing their honor in the trash in the process. Every comedian absolutely hates when someone uploads a bit they're practicing online without permission. That is universal, so you'd think they'd have a little grace in this situation instead of chomping at the bit to pile on someone they've already hammered time and time again. Oh, the jokes? They killed, by the way. Even the naysayers don't attempt to argue how well it did with the crowd. I've been to clubs. I've performed comedy at clubs. That's a solidly good response for a regular set at a club. This was no taping. This was no comedy special. This was a test. And it passed. There's room for improvement structurally and linguistically, but it passed. So what do the emotionally disturbed progressives do? They call him the new Milo Yiannopoulos. They call him Trump at a rally. I've been asked why outrage is always considered a political issue, and that's why. Because they treat what they don't like as their mortal enemy and label them politically in the process. I don't like what he said, so he's Trump now. He's Milo now. I now put him in the same box I put everyone else I disagree with. The contemptible, racist, evil, fill-in-the-blank phobic box. See, it's never just, I didn't appreciate that joke anymore, like it used to be. Now it's, I didn't appreciate that joke, and the person who said it must be a right-wing troll, and anyone who likes the joke is also a right-wing troll. It's so much harder to reconcile things you dislike than it is to just put them in a fucking box you otherwise never open. So some people don't. And there's nothing respectable about it. There is nothing respectable about avoiding tough ideas or hard conversation or refusing to engage with things you have problems with. It's how you get brainwashed. It's how you stay in a lifeless, unhappy marriage for 30 years or how you stay perpetually single. It's how you never reunite with estranged family members, and it's how you die alone and unloved because everyone around you was too reprehensibly flawed for you to tolerate. I've also been asked about why the right's outrage is always directed towards the left's outrage. The right outrages too, there's no doubt about it. You think I haven't seen Ben Shapiro freak out over abortion jokes? I sure have. Conservatives are mostly defending Louis C.K. among all of this, which you may expect, given that jokes about pronouns are generally considered more right-wing talking points. But conservatives will defend all comedians, no matter their politics, if it ever becomes an issue of free speech being taken away from them. That doesn't mean they don't absolutely trash the ones they hate, like Michelle Wolf or Amy Schumer, but if either of them were ever canceled because of outrage, not that that's possible, because right-wing outrage never canceled anybody, and it's usually a case of the left eating itself, like with Kevin Hart, conservatives would defend them as comedians who are in many ways some of the last bastions of free speech in society. That's the main difference between left and right outrage. Left outrage wants the bad thing to stop, and they'll do everything in their power to make it stop. Right outrage just shakes their head, makes a personal judgment, and decides to stop watching, or continues to hate watch without affecting any kind of change. A good way to know what side you're on is for you to answer this question. What do you think should happen to Louis C.K. as a result of this set? Should the club refuse him entry? If the club doesn't want to refuse him entry, do you think they should be forced to refuse him entry? Do you think Louis C.K. should never be able to perform stand-up again? Do you think every institution who enables him to perform should be boycotted and crippled financially? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're a lefty, all right. And if you answered yes to the first question, you're just dumb. What do you think should happen to Louis C.K. as a result of this set? Yes. There are radical sects of the religious right that will attempt to organize boycotts and silence speech they don't like that group of moms who thought Pokemon was satanic and shit like that. These are not your typical conservatives, just like progressives aren't your typical liberals. Strange how the deeply religious aspect is what makes the radical religious right so much like the radical left. Again, progressivism is a religion. The signs are everywhere. It's only a matter of time before they select a champion and revere them like a prophet. It sure ain't gonna be Louis C.K. anymore. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and I'll see you guys next time.